My name's Dion. I am a level 2 EFT tapping practitioner. I was certified by Hygiene, who is an accredited social worker of Embrace Empowerment. And I got accredited quite a few years ago, and it is something that has been greatly beneficial for myself as someone that has CPTSD and has had moments where things do get overwhelming. Things do become very stressful, and there is a difference between what is trauma and what is stress. But definitely having techniques that help alleviate the stress and actually help reduce feelings of overwhelm can actually be quite beneficial. Whether it's going to be the cure is going to be another matter altogether, but it's also any sort of technique. It's kind of like emotional hygiene. You can brush your teeth every day. It doesn't mean that you'll never see the dentist. It doesn't mean that you will not need actual professional care, but every little bit helps in your day, and you could look at it as incremental growth, where stress, overwhelm can definitely overwhelm and impede your life. But by just gently tapping away, reducing the stress around topics that are quite hard, we can actually get a little bit more flexibility in our life and reduce it, so we can actually improve our life. So everything where, if you look at it as a savings, you don't just save one big lump sum. You tend to put away money over time, and by tapping away stress over time, you're improving your emotional worth, your self-worth, and even how you see yourself. Because sometimes how we see ourselves is not so much the perception of who we are, it's who we were told to be. So it can be a very reactive method of living. And when we live in a reaction, it's not so much that, like take anxiety or fear, like going outside. It's not so much the going outside, it's the fear of what will happen, more the consequences of things, of going outside. It's like, this might happen, that might happen. And that perceived fear, or that anticipatory fear, can actually impede your life. And unfortunately, the more that you think about trying to get over something, the less it actually starts to happen, because a lot of the stress or a lot of the trauma is not actually a cognitive-driven response to things. Something has happened, it has overwhelmed our nervous system, and we don't know actually how to navigate that. And if we don't know, or we feel we should know, like, I should be able to do this, what's holding me back? If it's not a logical response, it may be and I'll use the term loosely here, an illogical response, as far as it's a irrational response, or something that is stored on the unconscious. It's beyond the actual rational mind. So a lot of our survival techniques, or mechanisms rather, are stored on the unconscious, our limbic system. The things that, when we were evolving, when we were on the savanna plains, when there was a fear, we weren't rationalizing, going, oh, there's a lion coming towards me. Is it within my best interest to be running right now? I don't know. I'll look up a YouTube video and see, should I actually be running from this lion? Oh no, it's got me now. Normally when we have something that is fearful, our body reacts before our mind. So it is reacting without our mind actually having to be involved in the process, similar to our breathing, similar to the beating of our heart. It's all controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And when we get dysregulated, when something has dysregulated that nervous system, when it is actually become stuck because something fearful has become so overwhelming, and now we're stuck in that perpetual, or perpetuating that fear of perceiving something that has happened to us onto other things, then that can impede our life, because we're living in the fear of something that has happened, and we don't want to live in the consequences of that happening again. So it's kind of like we're living in the survival mechanisms of something that has already occurred. And trauma is a lot where things have already occurred. It's alive and well in our body, and we are highly dysregulated, which means that we need things in our life little tools, little mechanisms to actually help down-regulate, to actually blow off some steam. One of the interesting things in the support work side of the business is I see, or get to see, different museums and stuff like that, get to venture out a little bit more into things that I wouldn't normally go into. And I was supporting a client going to a railway museum. And in the railway museum, they were talking about how steam trains work. And definitely with steam trains, you're shoveling in the fuel, you're shoveling in the coal or whatever it is, and the fire is burning, but it needs to actually create steam. And I don't know the mechanisms of a steam train, but what I was watching on this video is the steam needs to build up. It needs to build pressure to actually drive the train. But if it builds up too much steam, then it can actually probably cause an explosion or cause damage to the actual steam train. So on the steam train, it actually has this thing called a regulator. And on the regulator, it regulates the steam. So it blows off some steam every now and again so it doesn't become overwhelmed and impede the train's functionality to drive forward in life. And when we get very hot under the collar, when we need to blow off some steam, sometimes if we don't have healthy coping mechanisms or healthy tools, we tend to blur. We'll yell at people, we'll tell them off, and we'll actually blow off some steam by just causing more harm that is probably the harm that's being caused to us. So it perpetuates anger onto other people. So having stress reduction tools is kind of like having that little emotional regulator to regulate oneself so we don't get so hot under the collar. And this ties into the topic of today's EFT tapping, which is falling apart. Because in life, definitely in society, we have this thing where it's like we need to keep it together, hold it together, keep a stiff upper lip. You've got to put on a show. You need to just toughen up. And a lot of these things are very hard to maintain. It's like holding your breath. You can only do it for so long, because the more that you hold on to something, it takes a lot of energy to do that. And it takes a lot of physical energy, and it takes a lot of mental energy to check back in with yourself of, am I holding it together? It's like, am I being the image of what people want me to be or to see? So a lot of that takes time and energy to actually maintain. And at times we slip a little, or parts of how we're actually functioning start to surface, and we start to feel as if we're falling apart from trying to hold so much together. And we have to look at holding together as, is it holding it together to actually keep it together, or is it holding it together to actually in the process of holding kind of like armor, where we're holding ourselves together so we're protecting ourselves from not being vulnerable. And that vulnerability is often seen, definitely in society, as a weakness. But is it weakness, or is it sometimes an inconvenience to others if we show our emotions? Because some people can't actually, unfortunately, know how to manage their other people's emotions, because they struggle to manage their own. It's kind of like trying to manage someone to help them to get through something when you're barely struggling to get through that yourself. So sometimes we hide away ourselves, or hide away our sense of self, our emotional senses, to actually not be visible to other people, to keep up a facade in a way. And that facade is what we're holding together. To not be seen in the boss's eyes as you're having a breakdown, to not be seen in your partner's eyes that you're emotionally volatile, or to not be seen in other things. But the more that we try not to be seen by others, the less that we see of ourselves. Because once again, a lot of our time and energy is going into managing, holding something together, and the time and energy in that is actually being more directed into something rather than being directed inwards of the things that we're actually trying to hold together. Because it's kind of like collecting junk over time. You're going out collecting more things and putting it around the house, and it's like, I'll put things over here, and it's like, people need me to be this now, I'll go put that over there. And it's like, oh, this is in fashion now, I'll go put that over there, sort of thing. And the more that you're taking on and the more that you're trying to be for others, the less that you're being for yourself. So sometimes it is a matter of emotional decluttering, which means that the more that we're trying to hold together, sometimes we need to let go of things that aren't beneficial to our well-being. And by doing that, we can actually start to find ourselves a little bit more. There's more space, more room to find ourselves within. But if we can't see ourselves because we're just lost in the emotion, lost in the stress, even lost in the physical pain, and the physical pain kind of dominates a lot of things, where it's like, it's very hard to have a nice, joyful life if you've got a chronic headache. But if that headache is encompassing your whole body and you're living in chronic pain, it's very hard to be a cheerful person. So sometimes reducing the intensity, at least, around some of these emotions, around some of the stress, we can start to see ourselves and also have at least a cognitive ability to navigate the life in which we want to live, and rather than how we are trying to react to life. So all these sorts of things, where who we are as people sometimes is affected by our environment, but we can also not be completely affected by our environment by also starting to change our internal environment. So when you start to change your internal environment, your external environment starts to change as well. And yes, I could probably just do this whole hour of this chatting. Now, as I was talking about stress and trauma, it is kind of a tautology. It is trauma and overwhelm is a tautology. It's there's no difference between trauma and overwhelm. You sustain trauma by having an overwhelm to your emotional senses. So there's really no difference between saying trauma and overwhelm. But I think the misconception, or probably the intention around saying trauma and overwhelm, is that sometimes when we have trauma, we can have symptoms where they increase, they become intensified. And when we are triggered, for example, anything that is already stored there will start to exasperate. There we go, I said it. Or they start to increase. It's kind of like having a base level that for most people wouldn't actually be too stressful, but because we're hyper aroused, we're hyper vigilant, anything that actually creates a stressful response within us, be it perceived, or sometimes we don't know why we're becoming triggered. It could be that there might be a date, there might be a smell, there might be something that we're not consciously aware of that starts to trigger an already triggered system. Or I should probably change that. It will trigger an already dysregulated system. So the trigger is merely the mechanism for something that is already highly charged. So you could look at stress as kind of like, how to say it, it's kind of like already having a high level of charge from past stored traumas. And when you encounter stress, it's going to already trigger that stored trauma. Now, the trauma in itself is kind of like a stress. It's very stressful to live with trauma. It's a dysregulated nervous system. But day-to-day stresses, and this is probably the separation, the day-to-day stresses that most people would encounter in their life, those day-to-day stresses probably, they would happen, you move through it, it's uncomfortable, but you would move through the stress. But if you've already got a highly charged nervous system, then any of that day-to-day stress is going to touch upon that, and it's going to either, for some people, it might explode verbally, or it might just put the person in a complete shutdown response, or start to have like symptoms of like your skin starts to get very sensitive. You might, as I talked in one of the videos, start scratching sort of thing. All your nerves basically come alive. There's a hypersensitivity there. It starts to fire. Because once again, the body's going, okay, I've encountered stress. Okay, I need to keep myself alive as much as possible, and boom, sort of thing, or implodes. So the stress is actually of your day-to-day life already touching upon an overwhelmed system. And then it overwhelms a little bit more, or creates like sort of a trauma reaction sort of thing, or it puts you into that fight, flight, freeze response that's already been there. It just puts it on a high alert. So that's a little bit about the difference between stress and trauma. Yes, we can all have stressful days, but it doesn't mean that that's going to become stuck in your nervous system and you're going to be really living that for the rest of your life, or for a good part of your life, depending on your therapy. So once again, going back to the EFT tapping, having a stress reduction tool in your life when you feel like you're getting a little bit steamed up, or if the nervous system needs a bit of regulating, it's good to have something that is less cognitive driven and more starts to tap into the unconscious, or starts to down-regulate the nervous system. So I won't leave falling apart with just one round of EFT tapping. We'll go back into the EFT tapping again to touch upon something that we've already touched upon. And it's always good to, similar with, I'll go back to the gym metaphor, you don't go to the gym once and expect to have the muscles. You go to a gym repetitiously. So you're building up the reps, or anything that where you're learning, you want to keep learning. So it becomes a second habit or second nature, or you start to do things without actually having to think. It's like someone that plays the piano. After learning how to play the piano, they've gone through all the things, and then they can just sit down and they're not conscious going seeking to actually play a melody, to play a harmony. They're actually doing it unconsciously. They're doing it almost by feel in a way, or emotion, or they're feeling the music. So they're not having to logically think through how to play a piano to play a piano. They've gone through the repetitions to where it becomes second nature. And wouldn't it be great to have our stress reduce second nature, or at least have that space within ourselves to not be so reactive to things without having to think about not being so reactive to things. We're just going, here's a stressful thing. I know actually how to deal with it, or I've dealt with this, and I can actually have that reality checking of I've dealt with this stressful situation in my past. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have the same situation where I'm falling down. I've dealt with it. I now have good proof that I can deal with something else. But it's hard to do that when we're, once again, it's trapped in that sort of dysregulated mindset. We'll do another EFT tapping on that as we start to lean a little bit more into, I guess, the discomfort around that. And as we lean into something, once again, I'll use the gym metaphor because it is actually a very good metaphor to use. I will say it is a good metaphor. I mean, I go to Pilates regularly, but it is one of those things where that anticipatory fear, or the perceived fear. So when we need to do something, so like going to a gym, you might think, well, I don't fear going to a gym, but many people sign up for a gym membership and don't go. And you have to think, well, you want to get fitter, you want to get healthier, but we don't go. And the more that you don't go to the gym, the more that you don't get fitter. And we might create many different reasons in our life why we don't do things. So it's like, well, if I go to the gym, they'll see me as weak, and they'll laugh at me, or like men will look at me, or women will look at me, or gyms are just a rip-off, or there's like hundreds of different reasons. And in many ways it's like, well, and it's kind of like with my support work, sometimes I'm there to help people with the goals that they've identified, and they've got funding to actually help them with that. But there can be, it's kind of like, trying to get the motivation for them to do that sort of thing, because sometimes it does take a little push to get the ball rolling. And when we are within what is comfortable, sometimes it's actually hard to step out of that comfort zone, because when we look at it as what is comfortable, comfortable is also safe. And to step outside something that is unsafe is logically not normal. But anything where we need to grow, or need to have money, or need to eat to survive, means that we have to step outside of our safety zone. But the safety zone is also, if you look at the opposite of safety, that would mean danger. So all those perceived fears that we have, all the possible dangers that could happen to us. So why do it? But we're also wanting growth within our lives. So it becomes a matter of which is the more beneficial. And unfortunately, for some people, that decision gets made for them, where health issues start to decline. In most people's lives, it's like, well, why step outside of my comfort zone to actually get the things that I want in my life that'll make it better? And it's like, it kind of gets into that roller coaster thing. It's like looking at the roller coaster or skydiving sort of thing. It's like it's very scary until you're on the ride and you've got no control, and you might really enjoy it, or it's never going to be for you again. But the key ingredient there is actually trying. And sometimes with some things, it's trying and persisting in the trying, because similar with repetition to learning something or feeling stronger within our nervous system, if we only do something once and it has a result where like it addresses things that we are not aware of and that sort of ruined our perception of ourselves, then it might not be that like whatever it is incorrect. It's just that there's something that we didn't see within ourselves that may have been getting in our life. And when we look at seeing something, seeing is a perception. And when we perceive a fear, we're only imagining the fear of what could happen rather than what is actually reality happening in the moment. So you can create many different realities of what you perceive is going to happen when it actually hasn't happened. And unfortunately, we can also get into a confirmation bias if something does occur, and it's like, well, I told you so, I would never do it. But when we step into something, when we lean into something, when we start to address something, that is in the doing thing. Another way to look at it is love. Love is a doing word. There is the person that you want to ask out for a date, sort of thing. You have all the perceived fears of what he or she is going to say and that, so it's best never to ask. And hopefully they'll mind read and go, okay, it's like that person is interested in me, and I'll call them up. And wouldn't that it would be very, like, rather than door to door, like religious people, like door to door, I'm here for you. I am the person of your dreams. I heard what you were saying subconsciously, but unfortunately we don't live in that reality. It's a reality where we have someone that we want to bring into our lives, we feel will be beneficial to our lives, and it will be reciprocal. But the only way we can do that is by the doing. So it's moving into what we perceive as the fear and actually dealing with the reality rather than the perception. Because the other thing with perceiving fear, it's very friggin' tiring. Imagining all the different things of what is fearful actually has a result on your emotions. So you're creating a negative feedback loop of all the fearful situations and actually immobilizing yourself. And that immobilization never gets things done because we're too busy stuck in that perception of the fear. So that's why I do say with people that are sort of stepping into the therapy field of like addressing their emotions and that, it does take a little bit of bravery because it's stepping outside of the comfort zone of what we know. And sometimes what we know has been a result of what we've received. So that can be telling you that you're not enough, telling you that you should carry guilt, telling you all these negative things to yourself. And we start to take that on board. So that when we go to empower ourselves or start to get something for ourselves, we're starting from that ground basis of all the negative things that have told to us. So it's starting to break that cycle and starting to step outside of that negative feedback loop by actually addressing the things that were holding us back. Because a loop is just goes round and round and round. It doesn't go in a trajectory of any going. Basically, it just stays and it's stuck, basically. And when we look at trauma, when we look at stress, it becomes stuck within our body. We become overwhelmed by trauma. And that's what trauma is within the body. It's an overwhelming of the nervous system of something that has happened in the past, but unfortunately it's alive and well. So all those negative feedback loops that are occurring, they're occurring, and we're also wanting the best for ourselves, but we also have to address what wasn't best for ourselves, what was the things that are holding us back, so we can actually get that emotional freedom back within our lives. So we'll do a third round of EFT tapping as we come towards the final hour. And thank you for the thumbs up and everything like that. I do appreciate it. So our final round of EFT tapping, and I've got a heater on at the moment and it's very hot. It's a bit excessive. We are coming into winter, but it's not that cold. It's starting to get very stuffy in here. So yes, I'll start to wrap it up here as we come towards the hour, but that was 3 rounds on falling apart. Was lost what I was actually tapping on. But yes, 3 rounds on falling apart, and sometimes, yes, addressing the things that we were trying to keep together. It's kind of like unpacking that emotional baggage. We start to address things and start to free ourselves things. Another good therapy is internal family systems therapy, and literally addresses with parts, and there's no bad parts. It's just things that we actually have to address, and there's manager parts and all these sorts of things. But there's lots of different therapies that deal with that internal self, and when we feel better or more, at least more regulated or more safer within ourselves, then we feel more confident because we're not having to manage all these scary things. Our time and energy is not directed towards what might happen. We can direct it to what it is right now, and what it is right now feels confident to actually go out and navigate things, go into situations that they do know it's fearful, but also knowing that they are able to manage going through that, rather than being kept in the perceptions of how other people wanted us to be for them. So a good example of that is telling someone like something about their personal attributes, and like the person has to spend all this time trying to like adapt themselves to something, when it's really just someone that is just spewing a lot of negativity onto someone that is trying to change their sense of self or their perception of self. And you can never change yourself for someone else, because they'll always change who and what they are, sort of thing. So it's an endless battle, and it does feel like a battle trying to interact with that. So yeah, I'm Dion from Eflowtion Support Services. I'm for EFT Tapping one-on-one online. I'm also an NDIS support worker in the Brisbane area. And I'll catch you in the next one. I'll do another live at some stage. I don't think I'm working 2 weeks on a row this week. But I am now officially having a day off, and I'll enjoy that and look around with the cat and have a good day, and have an awesome day for the rest of your week. And I'll catch you in the next live or video. Bye for now.